Hey everyone, thanks for coming out to RidgeYouth tonight. As you guys can obviously tell, things are already going to be a little bit different tonight. We've shifted things around a little bit and we're just meeting in small groups, and I'm just going to record the message or as you're listening to it, and then you guys can have some small group time after that. We're trying to shift things around. It's been a bit of an interesting week. I don't know if you guys are keeping up on the goings on in the province, especially the news coming out from Dr. Bonnie Henry and things like that. But as a staff and a RidgeYouth leadership team, we are just trying to make sure that we're doing things in the safest way and the best way possible to keep us connected as a church community, while also making sure that, everyone is safe and no one's at risk. So yeah, bear with us, and thanks for coming out tonight, and we're really glad to spend the night with you. On that note, things going forward might still be changing, so I really recommend that you would follow us on Instagram. It's at RidgeYouth, no spaces or underscores or anything like that. Yeah, just follow us on Instagram. That's the easiest way for you to keep up to date on what's going on and any changes or pivots that might happen here at RidgeYouth. Yeah, so I really recommend follow us on Instagram, and that's the best way to keep up there. Anyways, on that note, let's continue on in our current sermon series as Dan has been leading us through, and it's called Messy Hope. Today we're going to be looking at 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 to 12. This is following along, like I said, with what Dan's been preaching. He's already explained a little bit about this book, and especially like he's been hitting it every week since we've been starting this, so I'm not going to touch on it too much, but I'll give you just a little quick recap, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So the author of this book, or this letter, was Peter, who, as you might remember, is one of Jesus's closest friends and closest disciples. And he wrote this letter to a bunch of churches that were all around, like what we would now see as modern day Turkey. They used to call it Asia Minor back in the day. Yeah, and in this letter, Peter talks to these Christians, these people that he's writing it to, a lot about having hope in God. He talks to them in a really encouraging tone, but he's encouraging and he's like coaching them. He's trying to teach them to understand what it means to worship God with their lives. And Peter talks a lot about how they need to live their lives, these Christians, how we even need to live our lives in ways that honor God, and how these Christians, and us as well, we should be expecting to see things like conflict and stress and trouble in our lives from doing so. So we're actually going to see quite a bit of that in this passage today, most of it actually. So if you've got a Bible with you, I recommend open it up and read along with me as we explore this. I'm going to be reading from the English Standard Version, so the wording might be different if you've got a different translation. And if you don't have a Bible with you, I'm going to have the words on screen here so you can just kind of read along. So once again, that passage is going to be 1 Peter 2, verses 9 to 12. So this is what it says. Peter writes, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are, God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." Now, there's a lot to unpack here, but what this passage actually means is kind of amazing. In this first little section here, Peter writes that believers, us Christians, these people who believed in Jesus, were a chosen race, or a royal priesthood. He describes us as a holy nation and people for God's own possession. See, Peter is really trying to highlight here. He's really trying to set these Christians and help them understand that they're set apart. They are special. They are different from the rest of the people who are around them. I'm not saying this is the typical kind of like Tumblr special. I don't know if Tumblr is still really a thing. It was when I was in high school. I don't know if it's a really kind of special, like Tumblr, you're special kind of way. And it's not really like the elementary school, like, you're special, have a gold star because you colored within the lines kind of special. No, what Peter's saying here is actually that they're specifically set apart. These people are really different. They're not like the people around them. And he's using some really interesting language specifically to show these people that they are special. Now, there's a lot of really cool history that I could go into and help unpack that, or the specific examples and the specific comparisons that Peter's trying to highlight here. But I don't want to go full Bible college nerd on you guys right now. He uses this terminology to highlight to the Jewish people. He reminds them of things that God said to them in the Old Testament, specifically saying, no, you are my people. You are set apart. You are different from the rest of the world around you. And for the non-Jewish people, he actually uses that same language to help remind them, oh, no, you were like the rest of the world before. But now because you believe in Jesus, now because you believe that he is the king, you are in fact part of that special people now. He's not fully equating them, again, not going to go full Bible college nerd on you, but he's really using this special language to show the people who originally read these letters that they are special, they are set apart, they are not like the rest of the people around them. And then Peter uses a special phrase. He calls Christians sojourners and exiles. And these words sojourner and exile, they're interesting ones. They're not really ones that we use all that much nowadays, except for maybe reading fiction books and the like. But he's trying to convey, again, that these people, these believers, these Christians, just like us, they're not really like the people that they're around. In fact, the word sojourner, it means like you're a traveler. It means that you're like going through this place, this land, and you know that it's not your home, and everyone around you also knows that it's not your home. And everyone, including yourself, knows that you're not meant to stay there. You're just traveling through. You're there for a little bit of time, and then you move on. And exiles, of course, it's the people who, they've been cast out of their homeland. They're not where they belong. They're not where they should be. They're no longer there. So using these words, I want to just work with you guys a little bit, help you to understand, like, have you ever walked into a place that you just really didn't feel like you were welcome at, or a place that you felt like you didn't belong? For example, like, I know when I was in high school, I was a massive nerd, really, really quiet, still am, but when I was in high school, I was also still a nerd. I felt at home hanging out with the other students in like the band room, or like the recording arts studio, or over in the computer programming area, like all those classrooms. That's where I would go, and I would spend time with my very tight-knit, very small group of close friends. I wasn't someone who liked to be in the commons. I wasn't someone who liked to be out where everyone's talking really loudly and there's a lot going on. I like to just be in the quiet areas, talking calmly, normally having conversations with the people that I was already close with. And when I wasn't in those situations, when I did, spend a lunch out in the commons, out amongst all of this craziness going on, all of the other students doing whatever they do, everyone who's loud, and anytime that I would spend time hanging out with my friends who were in like athletic programs, the people in weight training, and the people on the football team and things like that, I just didn't really feel like I belonged. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I knew that that wasn't the place that I felt I was at home. It wasn't the place that I belonged. And you see, that's kind of the feeling that Peter's trying to help evoke, trying to help these people understand is, yeah, you feel that way when you're not with the people that you like get along with the best. But in reality, he's trying to say here, no. That feeling is how we should feel about this entire world. He's saying that in this world, on this planet Earth, in this life that we have, we aren't meant to be here. We aren't meant to stay here. This place and this time that we live in, he wants you to understand that this is not the ultimate destination for us. Sure, we're here, and we're, gonna find some comfort and stuff along the way, but ultimately, we don't end up here. This is not all there is for us. We're not meant to be here. All of this brokenness and all this unfairness in the world, all of this stress and selfishness that we see in other people, we can understand that that's unjust, right? Like when you see something wrong, when you see someone steal or cheat or lie, in the core of your being that's not right. And Peter's trying to help evoke this emotion of, oh yeah, we see that stuff in this world and we know it's wrong, and we need to not act like that. We need to be separate from that, because that's not what we're meant to be like. That's not the stuff that we're meant to be doing. That's not the way that things are meant to be. We're all sojourners, these travelers, people passing through this earth and this life. We're not meant to stay here. We're not meant to hold on to this forever. We're living here for now, and soon we won't be. I think it was actually even just last week, Dan referenced this quote from C.S. Lewis, but it's way too relevant, so I'm gonna bring it up again. He said, C.S. Lewis wrote this: "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world." See, in relation to what Peter's saying here in this passage, C.S. Lewis, similarly, is saying, if we see that there is this injustice in the world, and we know just because this morality is in us, we know that these immoral things are wrong, and that things shouldn't be that way, and things are unfair, then there must exist a place or a time where these things that are wrong are simply not there. We're made for a world where there isn't injustice. And that's what Peter's saying. He's saying that we are this group of people who are set apart from this world, where all of this injustice happens. Peter speaks directly to this kind of stuff in a really interesting way, actually. In verse 12, he says this: so that when, speaking of the other people around them, so that when they speak against you as evildoers. He says that he's assuming, in fact, he's just declaring straight up, that the people around them are going to accuse them. They're going to say that what these Christians and believers are doing is not right, and they're going to bring trouble into their lives and stress into their lives simply because they are believers. And I mean, this also speaks to the evil and the injustice in the world that's going to come upon Christians, whether or not they believe yet or at all. We're going to face a lot of stress in this life. And Peter's basically just telling these Christians, you have to brace for it, and you have to live in light of the gospel. You have to live showing God's love in your life and confidence in God in your life, regardless of these stresses that are going to come up around you. He describes in verse 11, actually, the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. He's saying that we as Christians, we as believers, we need to separate ourselves from rooting ourselves in this world because we know that we're not destined for it. And the passions of the flesh, these things in the world, things like acting selfish and filling your life with meaningless possessions. All of this stuff, and the ways that we see people trying to cope with it, it weighs us down and ties us to this burden of living in a place that we don't belong. We can face this stress, though, with the confidence that God is in control. All of this crappy stuff that's going on, we can know is temporary. As Peter says, we're just traveling through this land. We're just sojourning. We're not meant to be here. It's not meant to be like this, and it's not always going to be like this. What he says actually parallels the message that Peter heard when he was with Jesus, while Jesus was out doing his ministry. Jesus preaches this incredibly long Sermon on the Mount. You can read it starting in Matthew 5, I believe, and it just goes for a few chapters, and it's just Jesus laying out this beautiful teaching of how we need to put our faith in him, that we need to live our lives in light of his teaching. Anyways, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it's like the whole second half of Matthew chapter 6. Jesus is teaching people that we're not meant for this world. He teaches that we don't need to be anxious and we don't need to worry about the things going on around us. Like he describes that we don't need to toil for food and for clothes because God will provide those things. But in times like these, we might not be particularly worrying about clothes or food, but what about like all of this craziness going on with COVID? What about the thought that we might never actually get to go back to the way things were a year ago? What about the political landscape? I know this might not be particularly relevant, but I've heard people of all ages talking about it. The US election is still going on right now as I'm recording this, probably still while you're watching it. All of this stress and stuff going on in our world, all of this struggling that we do and straining towards earthly things, we need to know that we're just travelers here. We need to know that God is in control. And in fact, all of this stuff is just temporary. What we need to do is understand that God really is the one in control. And that doing and understanding that frees us to live in a way that shows his love to those around us. If we're not just constantly complaining about how COVID wrecked our world and our lives, maybe it can give us an opportunity to show people how God has moved in us and moved in our relationship and helped us to really cherish times that we have to talk and spend with our friends and our family. Maybe if we're not just constantly fighting or making rude comments about other people because of their political opinions, maybe then we'd have time to talk about how God is moving through our church community, how you're seeing growth in people's lives, how you're seeing him move in the city of Maple Ridge, and people are coming to him. And if we're not just constantly judging others around us for how they look and how they act and talk, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have more time to converse with them. Show them that God has changed you and how he's worked through your life and the lives of people around you. It'll give you opportunity to connect with people and understand that they're real people and not just these negative things that you see in them. And in fact, that's how Peter ends this section of teaching, is he's telling these believers that they need to live in such a way that these Gentiles, these other people around them who are not believers, they can't accuse them of wrongdoing. They can't come up and say, oh, no, you Christians, you're all anti-homosexual. You all hate people who aren't just straight white men. No, if we live in a way that shows love to the people around us, then they can't do that. In fact, they'll come up to us and they'll start learning more about who Jesus is. They won't have that wall of prejudice against us. What Peter's saying here is that we need to live in a way that just shows God's love to the people and the world around us. Because if we do that, it provides opportunity for them to see the love of God at work. And if they see the love of God at work, it gives them opportunity to come to understand and know that Jesus loves them, that he loves this world, and that he died for them. It gives them an opportunity to encounter the gospel. And so what Peter writes here is effectively saying this: guys, we live in this world that just sucks, and we see so much that is wrong with it. We experience so much pain and turmoil, and it's so easy to live like everyone else does. But God is calling us. He's saying to us, no. You know that I'm here for you. You know that this is only temporary, and you know that on the other side is the way it's meant to be. So live like it. Have grace. Live in peace. Show people the love that I've shown you. Show people the grace that I've shown you. Peter's saying that God is telling his people, anyone who believes that Jesus is Lord, he's telling his people that they can trust him. That all of this is temporary, and that if they live like it, they can bring that light and that life into the world. So we, as believers, if we live in a way that shows peace and grace and love to those around us, we don't fall into the same habits of getting in squabbles and fights and, rudely accusing each other of different things because of our politics, or being prejudicial because someone doesn't dress as nice as they should, or, any of that. If we live in light, knowing that this world is only temporary, and we show people that love of God, then they might be able to encounter it and start doing the same. And so that's what we should do this week. This week, as you go and you feel this stress of the world on you, or you hear people talking negatively about each other, or especially talking about other people behind their backs and things like that, I urge you, take a moment to fight that instinct, fight that urge in your heart to just join in and be like, no. I'm not meant for that. I'm meant for a world where there isn't any of that. I'm meant for a world where there's no injustice, where there's no selfishness, no cheating, no prejudice. I'm meant for a world where God calls his people to live in perfect harmony with him. And maybe if I live like it, I can bring some other people with me. As we go this week, would you guys pray with me? Lord, we thank you that we have the opportunity to come together tonight, even if things changed up a little bit and we had to pivot. But you still provided an opportunity for us to be together in community. And Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you that we can come back to it every week and learn more about your character and who you are. Thank you that you teach us and you form our hearts. You soften them and you bring your love into them. And Lord, thank you for pouring your love out of us into the world around us. I pray that you would do that again this week. In all of our hearts, convict us if we start falling into those patterns of the people around us. Help us to see that we aren't of this world, that none of this injustice, none of this stress or anxiety or prejudice or anything like that, none of that is what you've destined for us. And help us to live that out. Help us to show our friends and our families and all of the people in our social circles here at RidgeYouth, here in our families or at school or in any other programs or teams or anything that we're involved in, Lord, I pray that you would help us to be beacons of your light to people. Help remove any of these walls that we might have built up through our actions, and give us opportunities to talk and show people about who you are and your love for them. Pray all this in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm going to have some small group questions up on the screen for you, and if you guys want to just talk through that with your small groups and hang out, and well, yeah, thanks for coming to RidgeYouth again this week.